On New Year's Eve, 2024, Puerto Rico went dark. Not a neighborhood, not a district, the island. Families sat in tropical heat with dead air conditioners and silent refrigerators, pulling out flashlights they'd learned to keep close. Hospital generators kicked on. Parents found candles. By January 1st, power was back for 98% of Puerto Rico's 1.47 million utility customers. Fast, technically, but the emotional damage wasn't technical at all. 2 days later, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon was sworn in as governor. No honeymoon, no grace period, just a governor's desk, a grid already failing, and 1.5 million people who had voted for her to fix it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the most dangerous political promise isn't the one that loses you an election. It's the one that, kept wrong, could leave an island in the dark and compromise US military readiness in the Caribbean. And the last part of this story? It has almost nothing to do with politics and almost everything to do with national security. Almost nobody is connecting those dots. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about LUMA energy. The anger is real and it's earned. LUMA is the private consortium, ATCO out of Calgary, Quanta Services out of Houston, that took over Puerto Rico's transmission and distribution system in June 2021. Since then, by every measurable standard, things have gotten worse. The U.S. Energy Information Administration reported that in 2024, Puerto Rico customers lost power for more than 73 hours on average. That includes 43 hours from major events. The rest, 30 hours, was just ordinary life on the island. The mainland US average, excluding major events, is roughly 2 hours per year. 19 interruptions per year in Puerto Rico. 19. And here's what makes it sting harder. Puerto Rico customers pay about 29 cents per kilowatt hour, roughly 80% higher than the mainland average. Higher costs, worse service, more outages. That combination is the material foundation of a rage that put Jennifer in office on a single promise: get rid of LUMA. She didn't mince words. When Puerto Rico's government filed suit to cancel LUMA's contract, she said, and these are her words, "The electrical system has not improved with the speed, consistency, or effectiveness that Puerto Rico deserves and that LUMA promised and lied to us about." A sitting governor, using the word lied, about a company still running the wires. Okay, so that's the case against LUMA. It's solid, but here's where it gets complicated. LUMA didn't build this hole, they fell into it. Before LUMA existed, the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, PREPA, had accumulated more than $9 billion in debt through decades of political interference, deferred maintenance, and structural mismanagement. PREPA didn't just run a flawed system. It ran a system whose foundation had been crumbling for 40 years. By the time LUMA arrived, PREPA was already in bankruptcy. Then Hurricane Maria hit in 2017. The GAO documented what followed: the longest blackout in United States history. Approximately 11 months. For perspective, Superstorm Sandy knocked out power in New York and New Jersey for roughly 2 weeks, and that was considered catastrophic. Puerto Rico went 11 months. Every outage since echoes that wound. When former U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm weighed in on Puerto Rico's grid crisis in January 2025, she didn't name LUMA as the problem. She said Puerto Rico needed more power generation. That distinction matters enormously. You can replace the company that carries the electricity. You still have the same amount of electricity to carry. Jennifer's administration announced in May 2025 that Unit 5 of Costa Sur came back online, adding 350 megawatts ahead of summer. A real win and a quiet admission. The problem isn't only the operator. And then there's the detail almost nobody talks about. When investigative journalists at Centro de Periodismo Investigativo asked which specific metrics would trigger LUMA's contract cancellation, And who enforces them? The Puerto Rico Energy Bureau and the Public-Private Partnerships Authority appeared to redirect to each other. Some formal performance thresholds wouldn't fully kick in until PREPA's debt restructuring was complete. Puerto Rico had a contract with a company that could theoretically be cancelled for poor performance, and the standards for that cancellation were still being worked out years into the deal. The governor who promised to fire LUMA also discovered she couldn't cleanly define what firing them required. And here's the contradiction at the center of her entire governorship. On April 2, 2025, she signed an executive order extending the energy emergency and exempting LUMA from permit obligations for grid work, cutting red tape so LUMA could move faster. The same month, she was publicly vowing the contract would be terminated. She attacked LUMA in press conferences. She helped LUMA avoid bureaucratic delays in the field. Both things are true. That's not hypocrisy. That's what governing a fragile system actually looks like. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. I drop videos like this every week, and the best part of this story is still coming. Okay, remember how I said the last part had almost nothing to do with politics? Here it is. In May 2025, Fort Buchanan, a U.S. Army installation in Puerto Rico, conducted what's called a Black Start exercise. Congressionally mandated. The mission: test the installation's ability to operate with zero grid power. Personnel said many operations continued seamlessly. Generators, redundant systems, preparation for a scenario they treat as not hypothetical but probable. The Pentagon is practicing for the blackout that Puerto Rican families are still living through. Consider the geography. Former Naval Air Station Roosevelt Roads in Sabre operated from 1943 to 2004, and in recent years has supported temporary military operations, counter-drug missions, regional deterrence in the Caribbean. This is not a quiet theater. U.S. operations here touch Venezuela, Cuba, and the broader hemisphere. Puerto Rico isn't incidentally located, it's strategically essential. Semaphore reported that grid disputes tied to the LUMA transition had frozen or suspended at least 11 projects aimed at improving reliability for 2 U.S. military bases. Total potential investment frozen, approximately $480 million. More than 200 grid upgrade projects across Puerto Rico stalled or on ice. Representative Pablo Hernandez put it plainly: a reliable power system is not just an economic issue, it's a national security issue. Once you see it this way, you can't unsee it. The dispute about who runs the wires has become a reason to stop improving the wires, including the wires serving U.S. military installations preparing for Caribbean operations. The governor who promised to fire LUMA is now making a decision where the wrong move doesn't just cost her an election. It freezes $480 million in military infrastructure. It stalls 200 grid projects mid-execution. And it deepens a power crisis that Pentagon planners are already treating as a readiness problem. That's not a local utility dispute. That's a national security calculation, wearing an unpaid electric bill. So there it is, the anger at LUMA is real and documented. The system underneath LUMA is older and more broken than the campaign promise implied. And the stakes now reach well beyond Puerto Rican ratepayers into the U.S. military's ability to project power in the Caribbean. If this changed how you see this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because the question of what happens when Jennifer actually forces LUMA out, that story is still unfolding.